All right. Welcome to the Sweet Science of Fighting podcast, the second episode with Graeme Morris. How are you going, Graeme?
Thanks, James. Yourself?
Not too bad. So I wanted to bring you on. You come from a rugby league background in terms of strength and conditioning, and now you're working with multiple fighters, specifically in Muay Thai. So just want to provide us just a little bit of background about yourself for the listeners, and then we'll dive into some more topics after that.
Yeah. How deep do you want me to go with background?
Just go for it. Just go for it.
I guess my background is I grew up on a dairy farm and a beef farm. So all I knew was sport and work back then. From there, I kind of went to the big smoke, which was Perth, which is not even big, but in Western Australia. And I did all my study there. So degree, honours, masters. I interned with the Western Force Academy there. After I finished my masters, went to London for a while. Probably didn't focus on my career, just did some PT, bit of party, a few trips around the place. And yeah, obviously fell into rugby league a bit when I moved to Sydney. And then from Sydney, I moved to Melbourne, where I am now, where I was working with the AFL umpires. Lost that gig through COVID, so cut funding. But probably the last 4 years or so, I've been doing a lot of stuff with combat athletes. Predominantly Muay Thai, kickboxing, because I have a big passion myself. I've been training in that myself for the last 7-8 years just to keep fit, because I don't really like running too much. I rather punch people, kick people. But yeah, and I consult for a little bit of MMA fighters. One of my guys kind of just had an Australasian boxing fight for the title. Unfortunately lost, but yeah, predominantly Muay Thai, kickboxing.
Nice.
And
do I drop any names in there too?
Yeah, River Daz, who just unfortunately lost the boxing title, but he was Australian champ Muay Thai. He switched across to Glory Kickboxing, was undefeated in that in Glory, but then with the COVID and everything, that kind of stopped the travel, and he kind of went, I might just give boxing a crack. And then after had a couple of pro fights, and then offered him the Australasian title, which unfortunately lost last week. But it was a massive step up, and it was a big change transitioning from the sports, because you go from the clinching and more of a slow paced Muay Thai to kickboxing, which is faster paced, to boxing, which is very, very ballistic. Got to move your head a lot more. It's a lot different. Also, Ramesh Habib, he's current Lion Muay Thai champ, world champ. So I work with him as well. And then my actual coach based back in Sydney, when I was in Sydney, I was training him one-on-one, but now I just consult online. Lewis Regis. Nice. He's fought in one. He fought Joseph Clay in one. I think he's still Australian champ, but he hasn't fought for a few years. So, but then other than that, I train a few pro fighters in that as well. Nice. I consult for a lot of fighters online now, because I think it's that their schedule so big that you can kind of fill this gap. And with the training software we have these days, with all these different platforms, you can actually, a lot of these guys have an understanding of what they're doing, so you can kind of fill that gap from afar quite often.
Nice. Yeah, you've got quite a big list of fighters under you. And actually, you mentioned about fighters transitioning from Muay Thai to boxing, or the differences between Muay Thai, kickboxing, and boxing. How does your approach change then from, say, strength training? We can even cover some of the conditioning side too. How does that change, say, a boxer versus a kickboxer, or a kickboxer versus Muay Thai? Because obviously people see, they're all striking arts. They're all 2 to 3 minute rounds. So we just do the same thing. But how do you see those differences? You mentioned some of the small differences there.
Yeah, well, first of all, boxing, quite often you're gonna have a lot more rounds. So, Muay Thai is traditionally 3 to 5 rounds, right? It's the same as Glory, unless it's championship fights. But with Muay Thai, you're gonna have a lot more clinching, a lot more grinding. There's more of a mix between that ballistic and that grinding strength. As you go to kickboxing, it's getting more ballistic, and then boxing is just completely more ballistic. I'd say that you have to have a lot more reactive strength there, because you're popping in and out a lot more, moving your head more. In terms of the conditioning, I still think it's just slightly different. I still think you've got to have that huge aerobic base for all of them. Just because even though, like, I think if you look at the energy system stuff in Muay Thai, and even they probably say it's very glycolytic, but you've got to have that aerobic, that base. Plus, you don't want those guys going glycolytic unless they have to. So if you can push the edge of that aerobic base, it means they're less likely to get fatigued. But I think just in terms of these guys' training loads, the aerobic energy system is so important, because just the recovery between training sessions, allow them to get more training in, more quality training in, just for general well-being. Obviously, you need to have that lactic component for all of them, because you want to have that knockout ability. Sure. You want to be able to, skills equal, you want to have harder strikes. And then obviously when we have these flurries and we're grinding, you still need to have that glycolytic stuff, because that's kind of what's going to keep you going in those flurries. So I think you need a balance for all three of them. Probably it's just difference in terms of with the boxing, you're not kicking or you're not kneeing. And then I think those guys that transition across, they find that quite difficult to start with, because before you're mixing up all your strikes, and now you just solely boxing. So guys can get fatigued. What I found was with them as well, that they got fatigued in the legs, actually, because you have that wider base stance. All of a sudden your center of mass comes down, because no one's chopping your front leg, and obviously you can throw a lot more powerful strikes from that wider stance. So I found that they fatigued their legs a little bit. So yeah, that's probably it, really.
Yeah. I've got multiple questions from that. I'm gonna try to remember them all, but I'm gonna start with kind of where you left off on the conditioning side. So you mentioned that obviously you need that strong aerobic base. Do you have a go-to, I guess, methodology or philosophy around how you're developing that low end, essentially that low end energy system for their combat sport?
Yeah, well, you're gonna find that a lot of these guys do a lot of running anyway. Now, and funny thing is, when I first got into combat, like when I was really getting into it, I was like, guys, you don't need to do all this running. It's not needed. You can do like, the Joel Jamieson, what's it called? The Road 2.0. You can mix up all his methodology. You can mix him with shadow boxing, working at 130 to 150 cardiac output, low intensity stuff. You don't, rather than being so general, you can mix it up with some more specificity, a bit more shadow boxing, skipping, a little bit of bag work, and you can kind of like circuit it like that. But what I've kind of worked out over the years is that for a lot of these guys, that basic road running is kind of like, I think it distresses them, because in the fight game, you're always inside, roof over your head, and the ability to go outside and have fresh air, run through the bush, or do anything like this, for a lot of these guys, it's like it lets them clear their mind. So I've kind of gone a little bit full circle in that, because it's like, that's when they switch off, and maybe they're not completely thinking about fighting in that aspect. But I think, that lower intensity stuff, even if it's outside, a little bit of road running, you can do it, as I said before, mixing it up with shadow boxing, off feet stuff. Probably the off feet stuff is going to be further away from the fight after guys are finished fight, and they're building that general stuff. But as we're getting more specific to fight time, we'll probably start cutting away some of that that probably low intensity stuff. Nice. And it's going to be a lot more specific. So if you're going to have that general to specific, higher volume probably stuff to a bit more lower volume but more intensity.
Nice.
And then probably looking at aerobic power and all that's a little bit further away, but as you're getting closer, you're starting to probably work a little bit more lactic capacity, power, that stuff, because I'd probably think those a lot of those adaptations are probably the enzymes and stuff like that, which probably is not so structural. So you probably want that closer to the fight, but not for a long amount. I don't think you need it for a long amount of period, because if you're getting a lot of that stuff in your training anyway, you probably don't need a huge amount of it. So that's probably the icing on the cake, I feel.
So are you, say during that aerobic style phase, are you then still adding in some of that glycolytic or lactic energy system training, or are you keeping that purely, hey, we're targeting that aerobic energy system and maybe the high output end? Or is it just more like, you're going to get it through fight, maybe you're going to get it through some live sparring or something anyway, so I'm just going to touch on the other stuff.
Look, further away, this is the reality, right? And like further away, you say, okay, we're going to try and focus on this aerobic stuff and it's going to become more lactic. But let's face it, if I give guys the option further away from a fight, I look at that Joel Jamieson stuff, you know, the power, the capacity, and I might say, hey, okay, you might want to do bag work this day. But you have the choice to do off feed if you're sick of hitting the bag and you're further away from the fight. But as you're getting closer, you might want to make that more specific, or you will want to make that more specific. But I don't know if everyone out there, when you hit the bag and you're told to work on these low intensity parameters, you're not doing that. You're going to spike. You
just want to smash it.
You want to smash it. So you're going to get that stuff in there anyway. And you're always going to get that. Whenever you're hitting pads, oh yeah, I'm just going to go hit it soft. Not really. You're always going to get that mix of that glycolytic stuff in there, because you just want to hit the pads hard, or you want to hit the bag hard. So you're getting that anyway, I think. So yeah. So, but kind of what you said, I'd further away, I'd be working more power, more aerobic, and then bleeding that lactic stuff in, and probably reducing some of the aerobic stuff out there, and going from general to specific. But you're always going to have all three energy systems going.
Yeah. I actually wanted to circle back a little bit to that roadwork stuff, because obviously you're working with a lot of, I guess, high level professional guys, right? So they're doing essentially their combat sports training, maybe every day of the week, almost, sometimes multiple times a day. For say a hobbyist, maybe a hobbyist Muay Thai or boxer that's maybe training 3-4 times a week, would you still recommend, hey, go do your roadwork, or would you recommend then coming back and be like, maybe you should start looking at more specific stuff year round, because then that gives you a little more technical time?
Yeah, it depends. Do these guys want to become fighters, or?
Yeah, let's say they compete maybe a couple of times a year. Yeah,
well, I'd definitely say I'd be trying to make as much energy system developed specific as possible, because that's what's going to make you a better fighter. I feel.
For sure.
And then obviously, if you want to run because you enjoy running, go for a run. If you enjoy, but if I'm an amateur fighter, or I'm trying to do my first fight, and I'm at a lower level than a lot of these professionals are, I'm going to spend as much time trying to, do specific skills training. But then obviously I'll manipulate the intensities and that to try and target some of those energy systems that we're after. Yeah. Because at the end of the day, if you're at a lower level, doing road running is not going to help you if the other guy's way more skillful.
Yeah, I think a lot of people forget that, like, oh, yep, I need to get my conditioning up, so I'm going to go do circuits of whatever it is, CrossFit, road run at 5 a.m. 3-4 times a week. But if you're only doing your combat sport 3-4 times a week, how are you going to get better?
Just get better at fighting, bro.
yeah, for sure. No, that's awesome. And then I want to touch on a little bit of that strength side as well. I might come back to the conditioning side in a bit, but the strength side. So you mentioned boxers tend to need more reactive strength. So what is reactive strength essentially, and what is reactive strength to a boxer? And why is a boxer needing more reactive strength than, say, kickboxer or Muay Thai?
Yeah, well, I'd say reactive strength means you're probably using your tendons and your fascia a lot more than probably your muscles. I guess that's how you'd probably. Yeah,
that's pretty. Yeah, I mean, for someone who doesn't have a background in, say, strength conditioning, sports science, that's perfect,
Yeah. So, and the reason that's more important is because you're obviously bouncing around a lot more. Your footwork's a lot more bouncy compared to a Muay Thai guy who's probably more plodding on the spot. And kickboxing is probably that blend in between, because it depends where you come from. Some Muay Thai fighters transition to kickboxing, but then you have a lot of European guys or Dutch guys who will just be pure kickboxing, where they'll have they'll probably have better hands, and they'll probably throw more combos. Whereas you get the more Thai guys where they don't throw as many combos, but when they're throwing full power, just trying to kill. But what was the question about? What was the question again about elasticity and
about reactive strength for boxers? How are you essentially developing reactive strength for boxers?
Well, the other thing is, I think you don't want to go crazy either, because they're getting so much of that specificity in their specific training. They're going to probably skip more. They're probably going to do being a lot more bouncy in their training. So I think with all these guys anyway, you want to have a lot of, I think it's a lot more similar than people think, because you just need that you need that general work in there, because your sport does take care of a lot of that stuff already. If you're skipping a lot as a boxer and you're bouncing in and out with your footwork, you're getting a lot of that already. Whereas sometimes you probably want some of that general stuff. And then in the opposite of that, Muay Thai, you might want to have some more plyometric stuff in there to make you more reactive. It's kind of like the opposite. Doesn't,
fill in the gaps.
Exactly right. Exactly right. You're filling in the gaps. That Muay Thai guy might not have that. And you might want them a little bit lighter on their feet. So you might actually sometimes give them a little bit more plyometric stuff than a boxer. It just depends, because if you give the boxer too much plyometric stuff, maybe it's going to cook them, because they're already getting that within their training anyway.
Do you ever provide, say, higher intensity plyometrics then for the boxers, considering they're only really getting low level, essentially extensive plyometrics?
Yes, I will for sure. I'll progress that through, but it'll be lower volume. Like I'm not going crazy on that. And that will depend. Like people always say, oh, these are the phases you go through. Nah, whatever. Like that's good in that's good in theory. I'll just do it to the capability of the athlete.
Yeah.
Because a lot of fighters in that, they don't plyometrically, and like you do these exercises and that, they've had such a big low training age in terms of the strength and the strength side of things, that, but they've got so much specificity. Sometimes you just got to keep it really basic. So that would be what I prescribe, will be solely based on where the training history of the athlete.
Yeah.
Nice.
Do you have do you have some examples of maybe some high level plyometric exercises that you would use? Yeah,
well, I like I'll start the extensive stuff at further away, obviously, and as we're progressing through. But I'll do anywhere from like line hops in the warm ups, and then I'll do the same things. I'll just maybe do hurdle hop and stick to start, repeat hurdle hop, high low hurdle hops. I still do the single leg hops repeated with my with River when he's doing boxing. Then for jumps, we're doing a lot of scissor jumps and things like that. It just depends, but like just that general theme. Do you know what I mean? It's probably like I'm not doing like bounds or anything like track and field guys, but I'll have the hurdle hops in there, the single leg hops in there. We might do some height and stuff like that, and we're just layering on the intensity, but then keeping the line jumps in to potentiate the nervous system at the start of the session or something like that. So we're getting that lower limb robustness from the knee to the ankle. I even still use that, like the rudimentary altus stuff in there sometimes as warm-ups, just the single leg jump and stick, double stick, triple stick, medial, lateral, backwards, different planes, rotational hops. They serve my warm-up, and then I might do some more intensive plyometric depending where they're at in the session. And you're probably just combining it as contrast, and whether or not you're getting that potentiation, I'm not sure, but it just fits into the session. It allows you to get more density of that training. So people can argue about that. I think sometimes it's just about getting the work in.
Yeah, for sure. I want to dive a little deeper into the actual session itself. So how is your strength training session structured? You mentioned you have a warm up and you do some of these, say, line jumps and things, almost like as a power potentiation almost. So from there, how does that progress through to the rest of the session? Or what does the rest of the session entail, essentially?
My warm up stuff is like, I don't know if you know David Gray. I do a lot of his type work. So I'm looking at a lot of hip stuff, because I want my athletes to have good range of motion for the hips, to have good internal rotation, external rotation, especially with kickboxers as well, but even with boxers, because that's where your power's coming from, is your hips. So we'll do that. We'll also do some scap shoulder prep in the warm up. It might be crawls, it might be static holds, scap work, just to build some robustness through there. Then from there, we might go into some type of hop scenario just to potentiate everything. Then we're looking at, if it's further away from a fight, we might have more strength orientated, more tissue quality stuff. As we're getting closer, it's going to be more power related stuff. But let's say we're getting more spot, but let's say at the start, we probably do like a power type circuit. There might be like a med ball rotation type thing. There might be a power jump of some sort. Then there might be an upper body ballistic exercise. We might do that in circuit fashion. We'll probably do a lower body strength movement, an upper body push-pull strength movement. And that movement will depend where we're at camp. If it's fight camp, it's probably going to be explosive variation. If it's further away, it might be just do traditional lifts. And when I say traditional lifts, for example, say we're doing a trap bar further away at fight camp, it might be like a band resisted trap bar, something like that. And then basically my accessories will depend on probably the type of fighter, but there's going to be some neck progressions, some type of wrist work, I'm just looking for areas that are probably prone to injury within that sport.
Yeah. And
I'm trying to basically tick off that just to keep that more robust, more resilient. Because at the end of the day, I think most people think that you just strength training to get more powerful and all this, but for me, I think it's just to keep give my athletes the ability to do more specific fight training.
Yeah.
I want them resilient and robust. I want them to not break down and not have any missed sessions. That's the main thing I'm trying to achieve. Obviously, as well, the basics, I want a high general strength. I want to increase the power output of the movement seen within the sport. But I think that the ability to make them resilient and robust so they can train more is really important.
Yeah, for sure. There's some actually some good research, as you know as well. Generally, the stronger the athlete, the higher training load they can handle, the less risk of injury they have. So, it's an all-encompassing thing, not just a performance thing. It's for them to be able to continue on, what they're doing. But I also want to, is that 2 or 3 times a week you're doing? Does that change?
Listen,
depending on
further away from the fight, guys will traditionally do, I'll have like 2, then I'll have an option to do a third. And that third session might be a little bit lower in volume. And it's probably, just so they can tick it off, it might be on a Saturday morning or something like that, where they go, oh, I feel good this week, I'm going to do that. But when it gets into fight camp and stuff like that, I'm just doing twice a week, man.
Yeah.
Because I want them to focus on their fighting. And also they're doing a lot more sparring. So even like during the fight camp and that, I'm very wary about how much soreness I'm creating, because they could be cutting weight. There could be stress, they're sparring, they could be carrying injuries, they've got all these different things. They might be sleeping less because they're anxious about the fight, I'm not sure. So I'm wary about how much soreness I'm creating in those sessions. So I'm trying to, tick off those boxes, but without breaking the athlete down. So probably just twice a week during.
Do you have a preference where your session fits in the day around their training? Is there also a preference during the week on what day it falls on during the week?
Yeah, look, I tried that whole high-low thing. Like, maybe we just do, the strength training on the sparring day. So that way all the soreness is mainly on one day. The next day is more aerobic and more technical and all that. It's good in theory. I think you're just trying to find gaps, bro. You're trying to find gaps. And then when it comes to fight camp and that, the sparring is obviously the most important thing. So you don't want to make sure that you're not cooking them before the sparring session. I think it's based on the schedule. And the other thing is, like, every gym's different as well. Like, you have sparring, some gyms will spar different nights. Then if you got Muay Thai, you got clinching as well, stuff like that. So for me, I'm just looking at the schedule. I'm trying to find gaps in the calendar where that's going to fit. And that's basically it.
Yeah, especially for probably some of your MMA guys that have to cover BJJ, striking, other special areas against the fence. Like, they got so much to cover. And then when it comes to clinching and wrestling and all that stuff, that's actually strength work really anyway. Yeah.
So and BJJ, that's all strength work as well. So it's getting that right balance. And that's the other thing. Like, what I found is, like, you'll see these BJJ guys and they'll be like, oh, I'm going to do shitloads of wrist work and things like that. And then what they do is they overcook all that, and then they go there and they can't grip because they've fried their muscle. So you got to be careful about what you're doing and what you're putting in there. So yes, it's that balance as well, I feel.
Yeah, for sure. I actually want to touch a little bit on, you mentioned like Muay Thai is a little more grind because you have that clinch. How are you preparing your athletes, I guess, for that, so they're stronger in that clinch, essentially more comfortable? how was that gym work preparing them for that? Whereas obviously a boxer doesn't really need to touch that.
Yeah, well, I guess all your general lifts, you got that there as well as your base. But then I got, I like to do specific, I don't know if you've seen it, those overcoming isometrics.
Yeah. Oh yeah, if you guys want to see those, I'll chuck them in the description from Graeme's Instagram. They're good stuff.
So I've been doing that for years, actually, probably for 3 so years. But we have like hug variations for like the body lock. Then we use smaller med balls for the head clinch, and then we're just changing positions. And it's basically you're squeezing as hard as possible for 7-8 seconds, and then changing positions. But because for me, I always look at that Verkhoshansky stuff. Is that your power output is a combination of motor potential and technical mastery. So when guys are clinching, it doesn't matter, or grappling or whatever, it's highly unlikely that guys are putting all their energy into that when they're sparring or they're training, because A, you don't want to kill your training partner. And also you're not going all out all the time. And there's that highly technical element. A lot of it's technical. But when we do those med ball stuff, it takes away the technical element and it just solely allows you to work on basically your motor potential. So it cuts that technical element out and just allows you to use brute force to try and, to squeeze the shit out of it. The other thing I like a lot of drop catch things with the back movements. So we'll do like machine rows, we drop catch, chest supported rows, drop catch, chin ups, drop catch. If they have a good base of strength, I have to have a good base of strength. Like I wouldn't do that if a guy can't do it, I pull up.
Yeah.
Drop catch, inverted rows, things like that, where you're getting that boom kind of thing. Because quite often when you see guys, Muay Thai fighters, they're clinching, they play, and when they get it, bang, like that's when they lock on. So you want to have that rate of force development there, which I think is really important.
Yeah, so you have to essentially switch that on as quick as possible. And
because you play boom, 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 and you got the position, and bang, and you want to have that. You want everything to turn on really quickly and lock that position. So yeah, that's probably. Yeah, so the drop catch stuff with the back movements, and then probably the specific clinch stuff, which I'd probably call special developmental exercises. I don't know. People can argue. It's always shades of grey, that stuff.
It fits somewhere in that continuum.
Yeah. And I used to over analyze all that stuff, and now I'm just like, it's specific.
Good enough. It's close enough. Yeah. So then I get asked quite often, and you've probably covered some of these, and your answer is probably similar, but what are some of the so-called, in your opinion, the best exercises in terms of exercise selection in the gym, say for a Muay Thai athlete or a boxer? Do you have anything that you, or maybe you have some go-to exercise that you use within your fight camp that are always there? Yeah,
look, as I said before, it all depends on the level of the athlete, their training age. Because if they've got a low training age, it's going to be a very simple program, okay? And a lot of guys don't have a high training age in a gym because they've just done so much specificity of just actual fight training that they don't have a high. So that's the first thing. I'm going to look for the low hanging fruit. So, I'm just going to have the basic squats. I don't really deadlift for much, but I'll do RDLs, do trap bar deadlifts, Romanian deadlifts, split squats, variations, squat variations.
So everything.
Press variations. But like just your basic compound movements. Then I'm probably going to have some explosive jumps, and that's going to be, from low intensity to high intensity. I'm going to have some med ball stuff, and I'm going to have some core stuff. But in terms of like specific, I'm not sure. I don't have any favorite exercises, mate.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the scenario, I'm looking at the adaptation I'm trying to achieve, and I just pick the appropriate tool.
That's a good way of going about it.
Yeah, I'm not married to any particular exercise. And because like I could say this is my favorite exercise, but then the athlete goes, I hate this exercise.
Yeah. Or he can't do it because he's injured.
Yeah, he doesn't like it. So like he doesn't want to come to my training session because he hates that exercise. So
Yeah, for sure. I mean, people can get married to, you need to do these exact things within this program, or essentially you can't do it. And it's like, there's so many, different ways to do things. You don't have to do certain exercises.
Yeah. I mean, we know the best program on paper is nothing unless you got buy-in.
Yeah.
So it's always going to be tailored towards the athlete. You might adapt it along the way. But what I will say is, like, I do want my athletes to have high levels of general strength. And that's going to be, you know, your hinge, your squat, your unit split squat, push-pull. Then I'm looking at, so that's just your general foundation. Then I'm looking at what's going to increase the power output of the exercise. So if we're talking about punching, I want explosive leg strength, right? I'm going to want to have like high rotational power. I want to have speed of the striking limb. I want to have stiffness on impact. So what are those muscles that need to create that stiffness? Can the athlete produce force? Can they relax? And can they stiffen? So I think you have to have those attributes in there to kind of, and if we break that down, you're probably looking at, you know, some lower limb strength and power work. You're looking at some rotational power work. You're looking at explosive and some force output through the upper body. And then you're looking at things, you know, you need to have a probably strong, stable shoulder, wrist, hips, you know, on impact. You want to have that effective mass on impact. Yeah. So. Yeah.
Nice. No, that's perfect. I want to circle a little bit back towards conditioning side as well, because you mentioned obviously how you go from, say, an aerobic low level side and you funnel through and you get more intensity, get closer to the fight, where you're going to touch more on that lactic energy system side, just to essentially top them up before the fight.
Yeah.
How are you, or what are you doing with that lactic side, and how are you balancing that with maybe the increased demands of sparring and contact training? Are you doing, say, 1 or 2 extra sessions, or are you kind of just giving it to them to do within their technical training, or is there another way to balance it?
I basically give 1 or 2, probably 2 options, and it's normally specific bag work. They can do off feed if they want, if they feel pretty bashed up. And I say to them, this is on you, whether or not you feel that you need that, because you're going to have some head coaches that, you know, do a lot of this stuff already within, you know, they get chucked in the pit, and they've got 3 guys, like one, they're switching over. In Muay Thai, you see them pinching all the time. You'll see it in MMA, like you see when City kickboxing do it, one to the other, and it looks horrible. Do you want to put that back on top? That's when actually, even though you want to be, like you want to cover that lactic stuff, that's when some of that low intensity running or something might come in place. Yeah. So even though I say that's what I'm doing, there's still leeway there, because guys might be getting so much of it that we want to cross the gap. We want to give them that low intensity stimulus so they can recover between sessions, so they feel better. And then also some guys they'll go crazy if they don't run, or if they don't do something low intensity, because they feel like that helps with their weight. Yeah. Or they feel like that if they're not doing it, the opposition is doing it. Yeah. Or they're getting unfitter. You know, or they lose their fitness. They're like, that guy's doing more than me, and it can mess with your head. Yeah. So I give guys options. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a nice way of doing it, to give options and just be like, leave it up to the fighter to kind of take charge of their own training, you know, like depending on how you feel.
Yeah, and you know that, man, with your own trainings, like some days you're like, oh, like I'm not doing that. Like that's what I had planned today. I don't, but rather than not doing it, here's a low intensity session. And then some days you're like, oh, today I had a low intensity session planned, but it's different to say combat sports, different to say field sports stuff, because you can push it harder. In field sports, if you push it, you cook someone and you tear their hammy, you're out for 5 weeks. You're not really getting this, soft tissue stuff so much in combat sports. So like, I feel like you can push the volume and intensity a little bit more. You might, you know, if guys who don't have his overuse and everything's holding up, you can push that if they feel good, because unless the ramifications, like you're not getting like soft tissue injuries, a groin strain, you know, that's pretty rare in combat sports. So I feel like, you know, today might be in a low intensity session plan, but hey, I feel good, I'm going for it, you know. But today I had a high intensity session plan, but I don't feel good. Here's a low intensity session, just so you get something done and you're ticking it off, and we're just trying to get closer to our goal.
You know, where are you fitting that conditioning within a training week? Is that again just finding slots, or are you trying to slot this maybe after a technical training session?
Yeah, it depends, man. It depends.
Yeah.
I know that's a cop out saying that, but yeah, I'll leave it up to the athlete. Sometimes they might tack it on to the end of their session.
Yeah.
But their session might have been too hard, so they might have an off day somewhere where they feel like they can get it in. Yeah, I'm kind of really leaving that up to them. Yeah.
No,
but if they, yeah, because they say, hey, I've got time after the class and I still feel okay. Okay, this is what you do. But look, I'm cooked after doing this session, but I have a space in this calendar here. I'm going to do it there.
Yeah. Okay. So for we've talked mainly about, I guess you could say, high level elite professional fighters, how they can prepare. Let's come down to say the hobbyist, maybe that's looking to compete, I don't know, club competition once or twice a year kind of thing. Maybe they train 3-4 times a week, if that. What are some strategies they can use then? Let's start with the conditioning cycles. We're talking about that now. What are some strategies they can use essentially after listening to this podcast, things they can start implementing into their training outside of the technical work? What would you recommend for them to do? Very general question, I know. Yeah, outside of the technical training.
Well, the first thing I do is like, can you fit in 10, 15 minutes after your class? You know, you're already there. So most people are time poor, right? You're already there. You've already made the effort to get there. Can you get 10, 15 minutes on top? And that might just be specific bag work, you know?
Yeah.
Maybe you can't get the training in the morning. Maybe you can just do some running, some shadow boxing, some skipping, because you don't have that time to get to the gym. So it's literally finding spots within the calendar where you can get that in.
Do you think you can microdose that aerobic conditioning? So if you did say 15 minutes almost every day, you think that would provide the similar value as having to do a longer session a couple of times a week?
I would say that if you're doing those smaller sessions, I'd probably say you have to lift the intensity.
Yeah.
Like I wouldn't be doing like low intensity, because that's like, you know, I don't think that's going to drive any adaptations for those short periods of time. But I think for the general person anyway, like they're probably going to be they're not going to be doing like 45-minute road runs. They might be going for a 20-minute road run. So obviously the intensity is going to be higher. You're going to be pushing it up that next bracket. So, you know, rather than working the capacity, you might be working power to drive adaptations that way. But yeah, so I'd probably say, okay, if you can't get to the gym, you can do something specific. You can skip, you can shadow box, you can find a mate to hit pads with. You might have a bag at home.
Nice.
And then, or you can just run. And then if you go to class, just tack on some stuff at the end.
Nice. Do you have a heart rate range, say, if they're going to look to target, say, capacity versus that aerobic power? You mentioned moving up that bracket. Do you have
I'd have to look up Joel Jamieson stuff, because you probably know what you'd know off the top of your head. What is it?
Yeah, like capacity, you're looking at like 120 to 150. You're looking at power.
Yeah, so that's
above 150, like 160-ish, close to the lactic threshold.
So capacity is basically just cardiac output, and that means so I'd say power is probably anything below lactate threshold, I guess.
Yeah,
just below that.
Actually, I listened to a really good thing the other day. 180 minus your age gives you the upper level of your aerobic, estimated. 180 minus your age. So if you're 30 years old, 150 gives you that top level of essentially where you want to train that capacity level. So that's something that you guys can use too, for those listening.
Yeah, nice.
And then let's touch on the strength side too, for say a hobbyist boxer, Muay Thai athlete, whatever, the same parameters. How often should they go to the gym, and what should they do in the gym, essentially? Yeah, very general question. Again.
Okay, I'd probably start with is just twice a week. I'll be looking at your general mobility for your hips, some shoulder prep. Then I'll be looking at maybe a jump variation, some type of jump. Then I'll be looking at lower body. One day you might have a hinge, the other day you might just have a lower body push. So when I say that, one day might be an RDL or a trap bar deadlift, the other day might be a squat or a split squat. Then I'll be looking at upper body push pull. One's vertical emphasis, the other one's horizontal on the other day. And then I'll just be looking at my accessories. You know, do I need some neck work? Do I need some extra shoulder work? Do I need some extra core work? I'd keep it simple like that. And I'll probably have 3 exercises and I'll just use it as like a circuit. I might have, say, abs, shoulder, and another lower body one or something like that. Yeah. And for my boxer, I'll be doing some neck work. If you're a Thai boxer, you might be able to get away with it because you do a lot of clinching. So sometimes you don't need the extra neck work because sometimes that can irritate your neck if you're clinching multiple times a week. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah. And if you've got an irritated neck, you can always get an iron neck. If you go down the description, I've got a discount code for anyone that wants to get one. But touching, I had something I was going to say now, and I completely forgot. The whole iron neck thing threw me off. Yes, that's the one. So regarding, there's obviously always debate. People are saying, hey, double leg or bilateral lower body exercises, single leg lower body exercises. One's more specific for fighting than the other. Obviously, you use both. So I'm pretty sure I know what your answer is anyway. But for the listeners, do you think that there needs to be emphasis put on one or the other for combat athletes, or is it just, hey, we just do a bit of both?
Both.
Yeah, I thought so.
Yeah. Simple way. I'll probably, and then, you know, if one phase has a little bit more bilateral, the next one's probably going to have a little bit more unilateral. Yeah. But sometimes I might have a combination of both in any way. I'm looking for that because I'm looking between that balance of force output from the bilateral and then working, you know, more tissue quality and that through probably the unilateral stuff. But now even with the unilateral stuff, you do this hand supported stuff and that really drives a lot of force. And you can drive a lot of force output. So I've been doing a bit of that, especially in my own training. I really like it. So, and you probably argue that's bordering on not even single leg. It's like that in between So I think both, man.
That's cool. I haven't been able to play around with the hand supported stuff. I just don't have it. For anyone who's listening, hand supported like squats, you're essentially holding like handles on the rack, but you have to have something like a safety squat bar. So you need to have something that sits on your upper body where you don't need to support it with your hands, and then you can do heavy lower body movements and support yourself essentially.
And I really like the safety bar squats for athletes anyway, because a lot of them struggle with front squats unless you have straps. But I really like the safety bar squat, and because it allows guys to really have more of an upright squat. So that way my squats are more squatty, and then I keep my hinges. Otherwise, sometimes you'll see guys that their squat actually looks like a hinge.
A good morning squat.
You're not really and you're not even really training the tissues that you're after. It ends up looking like a powerlifting squat, which is not really what I'm after. If you're trying to get that balance of all the different muscles over a week,
Nice. All right, so one last question I just wanted to touch on with you before we finish this up, and that is the idea of the oscillatory isometrics, or AFSM, if you want to go down the Cal Dietz route. And for anyone listening, essentially, it's like quick fire, rapid, I guess you could say, bobbing up and down if you want to make it into layman. So do you want to give us an idea of why you're using these oscillatory isometrics? I'll link a video from Graeme's Instagram. I think you've got one on there down in the description. Why you use it, and essentially what you're trying to get out of doing it, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few different variations that Cal has in that, but I've kind of created a few of my own. But look, one of the reasons I like it is because basically, if you look at, I think Matveev or whatever it was, that Russian scientist, he talked about, and whether or not this is legit, I'm not sure, but they talk about the ability of the highest level athlete is not about how much force they can necessarily produce. It's about how quickly they can relax as well. So, and if you look at sports in general, we know there's this impulse of force and there's this period of relaxation. For example, you look at the strike. McGill talks about the double peak contraction. You've got, I talk about a tea towel, when you're doing the dishes and that, and you wrap it up and you wet it and you flick it, and then you want it to relax. And then when you try and hit someone on the ass with it that's nearby, you stiffen it again. So you've got that contraction, that relaxation, that contraction. It's a good analogy, yeah?
That was solid. I haven't heard that one yet. You can claim that one.
So you flick it, you relax it, and you want to contract. And that's what happens in striking sports all the time. kicking, punching. You want to have that, produce the power, relax halfway through, on impact, stiffen. So I think this is one of these methods that allows you to train that impulse, that relaxation, that impulse. Other thing is, I think it's probably a little bit more specific to what happens in sport. It also probably allows you to deload the athlete. So they're not lifting, I was talking about before, and specifically in fight camp, you want to reduce some of that muscle soreness. You want to reduce the load on the body so that it doesn't create so much fatigue. So it does that. The reflexive trimetrics is the one that with the band. I don't know if you've seen it, the band.
Yeah.
And it's anchored into the ground. Now, for me, this is plyometrics for your hip. So in traditional plyometrics, guys, a lot of the work is going through your ankles, okay? Whereas when you do these reflexive trimetrics, I'm doing them in a position where it's kind of where athletes are producing their power from their strikes. So it's very specific, the joint angle specific. And then they're working up and down in this range, and it's plyometric in nature around that hip region where you're trying to produce that power. So it's kind of more specific to producing that power for your hips. And then some of the other oscillatory work we'll do is in the weakest region. So say if we're doing bench press, we're working that weakest position. If you're doing RDLs, you're working that bottom position, the weakest position. So in a traditional set, you might only get 5 reps out. All of a sudden, you're hitting 15 reps in that weakest position, but under speed. And I think that might carry over elsewhere. So I do the reflexive trimetric. We do a squat variation, a split squat variation. I use the oscillatory stuff with some presses, some rows, some RDLs. And I also do it with the core, actually, with the some wood chop variation, pale off press. I really like that.
I've seen that one.
Because it's work. It really it gives those guys the ability of the core to contract and relax, which I think is really specific for combat sports, in sports in general. That core stiffens and relaxes, stiffens, relaxes. And we also do it with med balls as well. Sometimes we'll do like the fake med ball chop a few times and then throw. So you're getting that stiffening, rotational power, learn to decelerate and stuff like that.
Is this purely a peaking modality you're using later in the camp?
I traditionally use it as a peaking modality, probably 3 to 4 weeks out. And I probably only do it with my athletes that have a good foundational strength. If they're weak as shit and I haven't earned the right to do it, I probably won't do it. No,
that's awesome. Well, thanks for coming.
And the other thing, sorry, with that, when people look at it, they're like, people need to realize that's just the icing on the cake. You know, these are 1%ers, these are 2%ers. We've still got all these other things in play that we're still working on. That's just kind of like the sprinkle at the end. Yeah,
this is not the Instagram guru doing things for Instagram that he's doing all year round. This is everything else has been done.
This is not Joel Steven, man. What's that other guy's name? The other one, athletic something.
There's another one.
There's another guy. This athletic. I don't know. He's got thousands of followers, and I just look at it and I'm going, "This is garbage."
Yeah, that's most of Instagram, isn't it? All good. Well, thanks for coming on, Graeme. I'm going to link your Instagram below as well. But I've had a couple of kickboxers ask me about online training. But if these guys, if they're listening, if they wanted to get in touch with you about online training, or if anyone else listening were thinking about getting an S&C coach to help them online, how would they get in touch with you?
Probably either my website, which I don't even know. I think it's graememorris.com.au. Or you can fill in there, or just go for Instagram, and that's Graeme_Morris.
Sweet. I'll link that below too.
Yeah. That's probably the easiest way, to be honest.
Perfect. Well, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it.
No worries, bro. Thank you.
Cheers.